The gallery collision. The late autumn light slanted through the high windows of the Hamilton Museum of Fine Arts, catching dust motes and casting golden rectangles across the marble floor. Fiona Walsh adjusted her simple black dress, feeling out of place among the glittering crowd at the annual fundraiser. As the museum's lead conservator, she preferred the quiet solitude of the restoration room to these champagne-soaked affairs. Just 2 more hours, she murmured to herself, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. At 32, Fiona had built a reputation for breathing life back into forgotten masterpieces, her hand steady and patient as she unveiled the original intentions of artists long dead. That Vermeer restoration was your work, wasn't it? The deep voice startled her, and she turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with sharp features softened only by curious gray eyes. Yes, she replied, surprised someone at this event would know about the technical aspects of her work. Though I prefer to say I collaborated with Vermeer across the centuries. His laugh was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. I like that. Dominic Blackwood, he introduced himself, extending his hand. The name hit her like a physical force. Dominic Blackwood, the real estate developer whose latest project threatened the historic Westbridge district. She took his hand briefly, professionalism overriding her instinct to turn away. Fiona Walsh, I restore art, you remove history. The words left her mouth before she could temper them. Instead of offense, interest flickered in his expression. That's quite an accusation from someone who doesn't know my plans. I know enough. Your Westbridge Tower would overshadow buildings that have stood for 2 centuries. Fiona clutched her champagne flute tighter. Do you ever wonder what's lost? When progress only looks forward. Around them, the gala continued, museum board members courting wealthy donors, the lifeblood of institutions like theirs. Her boss would be horrified at her confrontation with a potential benefactor. But Fiona had spent too many years carefully removing layers of grime from canvas to watch real history fall to wrecking balls. Dominic studied her with unexpected intensity. Most people in this room are either asking for my money or pretending my reputation doesn't precede me. Your honesty is refreshing. I'm not interested in being refreshing, Fiona replied. I'm interested in preservation. Perhaps we could discuss preservation over dinner, he suggested, his confidence clearly born from rarely hearing the word no. I don't think so, Mr. Blackwood. Dominic, he corrected. And why not? Surely debate serves your cause better than dismissal. Fiona shook her head. Because I've seen how these conversations go. The wealthy listen politely, make small concessions, and ultimately do exactly what they planned from the beginning. Something shifted in his expression, a flash of what might have been genuine hurt. You've decided quite a lot about me in under 5 minutes. Am I wrong? She challenged. Dominic surprised her by not immediately answering. He looked around at the opulent gallery, taking in the preserved works that had survived centuries of history. I suppose you'll have to give me the chance to prove whether you are, he finally said, slipping a business card into her reluctant hand. My personal number. When you're ready to have that conversation, call me. As he walked away, Fiona almost called after him, almost returned his card. But something, curiosity perhaps, made her slide it into her clutch instead. Later that night, as she locked up her workshop, her phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. The Westbridge plans are on my desk. I find myself wondering what you might see in them that I've missed. DB Fiona stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the delete button. She should ignore him, this man whose world operated on a scale that crushed smaller considerations beneath its weight. Instead, she found herself typing, I'm not for sale, Mr. Blackwood. His response came seconds later. I'm not buying, Ms. Walsh, I'm listening. She set the phone down, unsettled by the conversation and her own reluctance to end it. In the corner of her workshop stood a half-restored landscape, its horizon slowly emerging from beneath decades of neglect. Like the painting, there seemed to be something beneath Dominic Blackwood's surface that contradicted her first impression. And despite herself, Fiona wondered what might be revealed if she carefully cautiously, began to restore the truth beneath the assumptions. Persistence and principles, the Hamilton Museum of Fine Arts stood like a temple among the modern steel and glass buildings that surrounded it. Fiona Walsh had always found comfort in its steadfast presence, until today. She stared at the letter in her hand, the formal language doing little to soften the blow. Funding cuts would affect the conservation department first, with potential layoffs within 6 months. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, pacing her workshop. The Monet water lily she'd been painstakingly restoring seemed to ripple with her agitation. 3 years of work on this particular piece, and now she might not see it through to completion. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Meredith, the museum's development director, leaned against the doorframe, her expression grim. "I guess you got the memo," Meredith said. "The board's in panic mode. Donations are down, and expenses keep rising." Fiona folded the letter carefully. "There must be something we can do." "Actually," Meredith replied, a hint of conspiracy in her tone, "I've been meaning to ask, that man you were talking to at the gala, Dominic Blackwood? He called this morning asking about our conservation programs." Fiona felt a flush creep up her neck. "What did he want?" "To donate, presumably. But he specifically mentioned your name." Meredith raised an eyebrow. "He's worth millions, Fiona. Whatever you said to him, it made an impression." After Meredith left, Fiona pulled out her phone, staring at her brief exchange with Dominic from a week ago. She hadn't responded to his last message. With reluctant fingers, she typed, "The museum's conservation department is facing cuts. Is that why you called?" His response came while she was still holding the phone. "Partly. Have dinner with me tonight and we can discuss how I might help." She frowned. "I won't trade my company for a donation." The phone rang immediately. "When," she answered, Dominic's voice was firm. "That's not what I'm proposing, and I'm offended you'd think so." A pause. "I'm genuinely interested in your work, Fiona. The donation stands regardless, but I'd still like that dinner." 3 hours later, Fiona found herself seated across from Dominic at Ellsworth, a restaurant so exclusive she hadn't even known it. It existed in her city. She'd worn her best dress, a deep green that brought out her eyes but still felt underdressed among the clientele. "You look uncomfortable," Dominic observed, his own tailored suit fitting him like a second skin. "I am," she admitted. "This isn't my world." "And what is your world?" He leaned forward, those gray eyes intent. Quiet rooms, patience, the smell of linseed oil and varnish. She met his gaze. "Work that matters." "You don't think my work matters?" There was no hostility in his question, only curiosity. Fiona considered her words carefully. "I think it matters enormously. That's why I question how it's done." To her surprise, he smiled. "Tell me about the Monet you're restoring." The conversation flowed more easily than she expected. Dominic listened as she explained the technical challenges of the water lily painting, asking questions that revealed a genuine understanding of art. By the time dessert arrived, Fiona found herself laughing at his dry observations about the art world's pretensions. "Why development?" she asked finally. "With your knowledge of art, you could have gone in a different direction." Something closed in his expression. "My father built things. I followed the path laid out for me. And now? Now I build differently. More thoughtfully." He hesitated. "I've actually revised the Westbridge plan since our conversation." Fiona set down her spoon. "You're joking." "I'm not. I'd like to show you the changes. Perhaps tomorrow?" The invitation hung between them, weighted with more than professional interest. "Mr. Blackwood." "Dominic," he corrected again. "Dominic," she conceded. "I appreciate the dinner, but I need to be clear. I won't be another conquest, and I won't compromise my principles because you've shown interest in my work." His face hardened slightly. "Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? The powerful businessman used to getting what he wants?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment. "You know, for someone who specializes in uncovering what's beneath the surface, you're remarkably quick to make judgments based on appearances." The observation stung because it contained truth. Fiona looked down at her half-eaten dessert. Perhaps I am. I've revised those plans because your perspective had merit, not to impress you. His voice softened. Though I admit, impressing you has become surprisingly important to me. When he drove her home, the silence between them was charged with unspoken thoughts. Outside her modest apartment building, he turned to her. I'll have the revised plans sent to your office tomorrow, he said. No strings attached. Review them or don't. It's your choice. Fiona hesitated, her hand on the door handle. Why me? There are preservationists with more influence, art historians with more credentials. Dominic's smile held a hint of vulnerability she hadn't seen before. They don't look at paintings the way you do, like you're seeing the artist's soul. He looked away briefly. No one's ever looked at me like that, like they're trying to see past the surface. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and unexpected. Fiona felt something shift in her perception of him. Good night, Dominic, she said softly. Good night, Fiona. As she watched his car disappear down the street, Fiona wrestled with conflicting emotions. The man was persistent, intelligent, and unsettlingly perceptive, and despite all her reservations, she found herself already anticipating the plans that would arrive tomorrow, not just for what they might contain, but because they represented a connection she wasn't ready to sever. Broken facades. Rain pounded against the windows of the conservation lab, matching Fiona's turbulent mood. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling into strategically placed buckets, the third leak this month. But it wasn't the weather that troubled her. It was the stack of papers on her desk. Dominic's revised Westbridge plans had arrived as promised, along with a substantial donation to the museum's conservation department. The plans themselves were remarkable, preserving the historic facades while integrating modern structures. Behind them, creating a harmonious blend of old and new. He had listened. More than that, he had understood. You look like you're contemplating a particularly difficult restoration decision, came a voice from the doorway. Fiona looked up to find Dominic standing there, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat. Without the setting of wealth surrounding him, he seemed more approachable, almost ordinary, if one could ignore his commanding presence. The roof is leaking again, she said, gesturing to the buckets. Your donation bought us time, but the building itself is falling apart. He stepped inside, careful to avoid the water. May I? He asked, gesturing to the plans. She nodded, watching as he studied his own designs with critical eyes. These are good, she admitted finally. Better than good. They show respect for the history while acknowledging the need for progress. A smile touched his lips. High praise coming from you. Why did you really change them? She asked. Dominic set the plans down, looking directly at her. Because you made me see something I'd been missing. The soul of a place matters as much as its function. The honesty in his voice disarmed her. For weeks, she'd maintained her distance despite his persistent invitations, a gallery opening, a preservation conference, even a simple coffee. Each time she'd declined, telling herself it was professional caution rather than fear. There's another leak starting, he noted, pointing to a new drip forming near her workstation. Fiona sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's getting worse. The board is considering closing this wing for renovations, but there's no money. I could help, he offered, his tone careful. You've already donated generously. Not as Blackwood Developments, as me. He moved closer, his gaze intent. Fiona, let me help. The intimacy of his offer hung in the air between them. She knew, accepting would cross a boundary she'd carefully maintained. Why? She asked softly. Because I care about what you care about. He hesitated, then added, and I care about you. The admission shouldn't have surprised her, yet it did. In the weeks since their dinner, they'd exchanged occasional messages about the plans, professional but underlaid with something more personal. I don't know if I can separate the man from the billionaire, she confessed. Have you tried? The challenge in his question was gentle but direct. Before she could answer, a crash from above made them both jump. A large section of ceiling collapsed, sending plaster and water pouring onto her workstation. Fiona cried out, lunging to protect the Monet. Dominic moved faster, covering the painting with his body, his expensive suit soaking up the dirty water. Together they managed to move the artwork to safety, but the damage to the room was extensive. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hand steadying her shoulders. Fiona nodded, breathless from the near disaster. "The painting is safe," he finished, brushing plaster dust from her hair with surprising tenderness. "Unlike this ceiling." They stood close, adrenaline creating an unexpected intimacy. For the first time, Fiona allowed herself to truly look at him, not as Dominic Blackwood, billionaire developer, but simply as Dominic, a man who had just ruined a suit worth more than her monthly salary to save a painting he didn't own. "I think," she said slowly, "that I've been unfair to you." He shook his head. "Your caution is understandable. People in my position, we're used to getting what we want. It can make us careless with others." "Is that what happened with your ex-wife?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His divorce had been tabloid fodder years ago. The business magnate and the fashion model who'd cited irreconcilable differences after just 18 months. Something shuddered in his expression. "Camilla wanted the lifestyle, not me. When she realized I actually expected a partner rather than an ornament, things fell apart." The vulnerability in his admission cracked something in Fiona's carefully constructed defenses. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "No, you should." His gaze was steady. "If you're considering letting me closer, you should ask everything." The implication that she might be considering exactly that hung between them. Before Fiona could respond, her phone rang. The museum director, calling about the ceiling collapse. After a brief conversation, she hung up, her expression troubled. "They're closing the conservation wing immediately. All works are being moved to storage until repairs can be made." "And the Monet?" "Unfinished," she said quietly. "Possibly for months." Dominic watched her for a long moment, then made a decision. "I have a proposition, not a donation, a partnership." "What kind of partnership?" "My foundation renovates the conservation wing properly. In return, you consult on the historical aspects of the Westbridge project." He held up a hand as she began to protest. "As a paid professional, no strings, no expectations beyond your expertise." The offer was reasonable, even generous. Yet, Fiona hesitated, aware that accepting would inevitably draw them closer. The question wasn't whether she wanted that. She was beginning to admit to herself that she did, but whether she could trust it. "You don't have to answer now," he said, seeming to read her thoughts. "But know that the offer stands regardless of anything else between us." As the rain continued to pour through the broken ceiling, Fiona faced a crossroads. For years, she'd restored paintings by carefully removing layers that obscured their true nature. Now she was being asked to do the same with a man, to see past the wealth and power to whatever lay beneath. "I need time," she said finally. Dominic nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Time is something I can give." He turned to leave, then paused. "Fiona, when you restore a painting, how do you know when you've found its true essence?" She considered the question. "When what's revealed feels true, when it has both strength and vulnerability." A smile touched his lips. "I hope someday you'll see that in me." As he walked away, Fiona remained among the fallen plaster and dripping water, aware that something fundamental had shifted. The careful distance she'd maintained was eroding, revealing complications she'd tried to avoid, and possibilities she'd been afraid to acknowledge. Shattered glass. The opening of the newly renovated conservation wing drew the city's elite, turning the Hamilton Museum into a glittering showcase. Fiona stood near her workstation, now housed in a state-of-the-art facility with perfect lighting and climate control. watching as donors and art patrons mingled around displays explaining the conservation process. The Monet water lilies, nearly completed, held pride of place in the demonstration area. 6 weeks had passed since the ceiling collapse. 6 weeks of working closely with Dominic as both the renovation and the Westbridge project progressed. 6 weeks of gradual surrender to the connection growing between them. "Your vision brought this to life," came his voice beside her. Dominic handed her a champagne flute, his fingers brushing hers deliberately. "Our vision," she corrected, taking in his appearance. He'd abandoned his usual formal attire for the evening, wearing a simple dark sweater that softened his usual imposing presence. "You look different tonight. Less like a billionaire?" he asked, amusement in his eyes. "More like yourself," she replied. His smile deepened. High praise from the woman who sees beneath surfaces. The past weeks had revealed layers to Dominic she hadn't expected. His genuine passion for architectural history, his dry wit when away from public scrutiny, his patience with her continuing caution. Their professional collaboration had evolved into dinners, long walks through the city's historic districts, and conversations that stretched late into the evening. She'd begun to trust the man behind the wealth, even as she remained wary of the complications his world presented. Ms. Walsh called the museum director, approaching with several board members. "These gentlemen are fascinated by your work on the Monet. Would you mind explaining your process?" Fiona excused herself, giving Dominic an apologetic glance. He nodded in understanding, watching her move into her element as she discussed the technical aspects of restoration with animated precision. Later, as the crowd thinned, Fiona sought a moment of quiet in her office. She was reviewing her notes on the Westbridge historical elements when Meredith burst in, tablet in hand. "Have you seen this?" her friend demanded, turning the screen toward Fiona. The headline from a popular gossip site blared, "Blackwood's latest acquisition museum piece?" Below was a photo of Dominic and Fiona at dinner the previous week, his hand covering hers on the table, both of them laughing. The article insinuated that her influence over the billionaire explained both his sudden interest in historic preservation and the museum's miraculous funding windfall. "They're calling you his latest trophy," Meredith said gently. "It's all over social media." Fiona felt the blood drain from her face. "This is exactly what I feared. Fee, you can't let tabloid garbage—" "It's not about the article," Fiona interrupted. "It's about perception, about everything I've worked for being reduced to this." She'd spent years building her reputation on merit, on expertise, on quiet dedication to her craft. Now, in the public eye, she was simply the woman who had caught Dominic Blackwood's attention, her professional accomplishments secondary to her personal connection with him. A soft knock at the door revealed Dominic, his expression concerned. "I just saw the article," he said, stepping inside. "I've already called my legal team to have it taken down." "That won't erase what people are thinking," Fiona said, her voice strained. "What they'll continue to think." Meredith quietly excused herself, leaving them alone in the small office. "Since when do you care what people think?" Dominic asked, moving closer. "Since it affects my work." She stepped back, needing distance. "Everything I've accomplished, my restorations, my research, this renovation, all of it will be seen as something I gained through me," he finished, his tone hardening slightly. "Is that so terrible?" "Yes." The word escaped with more force than she intended. "Because it isn't true. Because I earned my position long before I met you. Because my work stands on its own merit. No one who knows you would ever question that. But everyone else will." She gestured toward the tablet. "In their eyes, I'm just another woman who caught your attention. A temporary diversion." Something flickered in his expression, hurt, quickly masked by anger. "Is that still how you see what's between us? A rich man's passing interest?" The question struck at the heart of her conflict. The truth was, she no longer saw him that way. In the past weeks, she'd come to know the man beneath the wealth. Thoughtful, complex, sometimes vulnerable. She'd begun to care for that man, perhaps even to love him. But loving Dominic meant entering his world, with all its public scrutiny and assumptions. No, she admitted quietly. But it doesn't matter how I see it. The world we live in, I don't give a damn about the world, he interrupted, closing the distance between them. I care about you, about us. There can't be an us without consequences, she insisted. Your life is public property. Everything you touch becomes news. So, your solution is to walk away? Hurt sharpened his tone. To decide for both of us that what we've found isn't worth fighting for? Fiona turned away, unable to face the intensity in his eyes. I've worked my entire career to be taken seriously, to be judged by my work, not by who I'm with. And you, think I haven't noticed? Haven't respected that? He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Fiona, I've bent over backward to keep our professional relationship separate from our personal one. I've respected every boundary you've set. I know, she whispered. Then why? His voice dropped, the anger giving way to raw emotion. Why pull away now when you finally started to let me in? The vulnerability in his question nearly broke her resolve, but the memory of the headlines, of whispers that would follow her through professional circles, strengthened her determination. Because I can't be who I am in your world. Dominic was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but intense. I have pursued you for months. Not because you're a challenge or a novelty, but because you see me. Not my wealth, not my reputation, but me. His eyes held hers. Do you know how rare that is in my life? To be known for who I am rather than what I possess? He stepped closer, his hands gently framing her face. I'm not asking you to enter my world, Fiona. I'm asking for the chance to build something new with you, something that honors who we both are. Tears threatened at the edges of her vision. And if I can't? His thumbs brushed her cheeks, his touch achingly tender. Then this is my final offer. Not an ultimatum, but a truth. I will walk away if that's what you truly want. I'll complete the museum funding as promised. I'll implement your recommendations for Westbridge. Our professional arrangements will stand. His voice wavered slightly. But I won't continue to pursue a woman who doesn't believe in the possibility of us. Not because I don't want to, God knows I do, but because we both deserve more than half measures. The honesty in his words stripped away her last defenses. This wasn't the demand of an entitled billionaire. It was the plea of a man who had laid his heart bare and asked only for honesty in return. What are you asking of me? She whispered. Courage, he answered simply. The same courage you show when you begin a restoration without knowing exactly what you'll uncover. His hands dropped from her face, creating a distance that felt suddenly vast. I'm not asking for forever tonight, just for the chance to see where this might lead, without you pulling away at the first sign of difficulty. The gallery beyond the office had emptied, leaving them in a silence broken only by the hum of the climate control system. Fiona stood at the precipice of a decision that would alter the course of her life, regardless of which path she chose. I need to think, she said finally. Alone. Dominic nodded, acceptance and disappointment mingling in his expression. I understand. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Fiona, I've never known anyone like you, and I've never wanted anyone more. The door closed behind him, leaving Fiona alone with the echo of his words and the weight of her fear. Outside the window, the city lights blurred through unshed tears as she confronted the truth she'd been avoiding. She wasn't just afraid of losing her professional identity. She was afraid of loving a man whose world could swallow her whole. Restoration dawn broke over the city, painting the skyline in hues of amber and rose. Fiona hadn't slept. Instead, she'd walked the quiet streets until her feet ached, her mind cycling through memories of the past months. Each interaction with Dominic, each careful step toward trust, each moment of connection she'd both welcomed and feared. She found herself at the Westbridge district as the first workers arrived. Construction had begun based on the revised plans, their plans, a vision they had created together. Historic facades stood draped in protective coverings, waiting to be integrated into something new without losing their essence. Like us, she thought. The realization stopped her in her tracks. For hours, she had circled the same question. How could she maintain her identity while loving someone whose very existence altered how the world saw her? Now, watching the careful preservation happening around her, she understood the flaw in her thinking. She'd been so focused on what she might lose that she hadn't considered what might be gained, what they might build together. By mid-morning, Fiona stood outside Dominic's office building, her heart racing as the elevator carried her to the top floor. His assistant recognized her immediately. "Ms. Walsh," the woman said, surprise evident in her tone. "Mr. Blackwood isn't expecting you." "I know," Fiona replied. "Is he available?" "He's in a meeting, but—" The assistant hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Wait here." Minutes later, the door to the conference room opened. Dominic emerged, his expression carefully composed until he saw her. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, quickly guarded. "Fiona," he said, her name carrying a weight of unspoken questions. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Privately." He nodded, leading her to his office and closing the door. The space was surprisingly understated, warm woods and shelves lined with books on architecture and art. One wall held framed architectural drawings, another, to her surprise, displayed a small collection of paintings by emerging artists. "Didn't expect to see you today," he said, maintaining a careful distance. Fiona took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about restoration." His brow furrowed slightly. "Restoration?" "Yes." She moved to the window, gathering her thoughts as she looked out at the city below. "When I restore a painting, I don't just repair damage. I reveal what was always there beneath the layers of time and neglect." She turned to face him. "Last night you asked for courage, the courage to see where this might lead without pulling away. But I realize now that what I've really been afraid of is how loving you might change me." Something softened in his stance. "And what conclusion did you reach? That change isn't always loss." She took a step toward him. "Sometimes it's restoration, the revealing of something that was waiting to be discovered." Dominic remained still, his gaze intent on her face. "What are you saying, Fiona?" "I'm saying I want to try." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Not by becoming someone else, not by fitting myself into your world or asking you to abandon yours, but by creating something new together. Something that honors who we both are." He moved toward her then, hope replacing caution in his expression. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," she admitted with a small laugh. "But yes, I'm sure about you, about who you are beneath all the trappings of wealth and power." She reached for his hand, taking it in hers. "That man is worth the risk." Dominic's fingers tightened around hers. "The world won't always be kind." "I know. There will be more headlines, more assumptions." She met his gaze steadily. "But I'm done letting fear of what others might think determine my choices." "What changed your mind?" "I realized I've been treating us like a damaged painting, focusing on the flaws, the difficulties, the parts that need fixing." She smiled softly. "When I should have been seeing the beauty that's already there, waiting to be revealed." The tension drained from his shoulders. "I've waited months to hear you say something like that." "I know. And I'm sorry it took me so long." She took a deep breath. "But I need you to understand something. I won't lose myself in this relationship. My work, my independence, they're essential to who I am." "I would never ask you to be less than who you are," he said, his voice low and fervent. "It's your strength, your principles, your passion that drew me to you in the first place." He closed the remaining distance between them, his free hand coming up to brush her cheek. "The woman who challenged me at a fundraiser and made me rethink plans I'd spent months developing, that's who I fell in love with." The word love hung in the air between them, honest and unretracted. Fiona felt something settle in her chest, a certainty that had been building for weeks. "I think I've been falling in love with you since you ruined that expensive suit to save my painting," she admitted. His smile was radiant, worth every penny. When he kissed her, it felt like the culmination of a journey they'd been on since that first contentious meeting, a path of gradual revelation, of layers carefully removed to expose the truth beneath. 6 months later, the renovated West Bridge district opened to the public. The historical facades now housed a mixture of affordable housing, studio spaces for artists, and a small museum dedicated to the district's history, a collaboration between Blackwood Developments and the Hamilton Museum of Fine Arts. At the opening ceremony, Fiona stood slightly apart from the crowd, watching as Dominic addressed the gathered officials and community members. The press was there, of course, and the speculation about their relationship had never fully subsided. But she had learned to focus on what mattered, the work they'd created together, the lives they were touching, and the relationship they continued to build day by day. "This project represents more than just a development," Dominic was saying. "It demonstrates that progress doesn't have to come at the expense of history, that with care and attention, we can preserve the past while creating space for the future." His eyes found hers in the crowd, a private smile passing between them. They both knew he wasn't just talking about buildings. Later, as they walked through the district hand in hand, Fiona paused before one of the preserved facades. The afternoon light caught the restored details of the old stonework, now cleaned and reinforced to stand for another century. "Beautiful work," Dominic said, following her gaze. "Both the original and the restoration." "That's the thing about restoration," she replied, squeezing his hand. "It's not about erasing the past or pretending something is brand new. It's about honoring what came before while making sure it has a future." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Rather like us," Fiona smiled, leaning into his embrace. The journey hadn't been easy. There were still moments when their different worlds created tensions, still headlines that reduced her to Blackwood's preservationist girlfriend, still well-meaning friends who wondered if she'd compromised her principles. But she knew the truth. In finding a way to love Dominic without losing herself, she hadn't compromised. She'd expanded. Like the district around them, they had found a way to integrate seemingly opposing elements into something stronger than either could have been alone. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That some things are worth the risk," she answered, "and that sometimes what looks like an ultimatum is really just an invitation to be brave." Dominic smiled, understanding in his eyes. They walked on through the district they had saved together, their steps in rhythm, their futures intertwined, not by circumstance or convenience but by choice. A choice they continued to make day after day, with open eyes and full hearts. Behind them, the setting sun gilded the old buildings in gold, highlighting the careful work that had revealed their hidden beauty. Like a masterfully restored painting, the past and present had been reconciled, creating something that would endure, changed but authentic, different but whole. Just like the love they had found against all expectations in the space between their worlds.